What happened to Saturn, the American car company that promised to revolutionize the automobile industry? It had loyal customers, innovative cars, record sales, and a completely different way of selling vehicles. Yet in 2010, Saturn disappeared forever. Was it poor management, General Motors, fierce competition, or simply being too different? The answer may surprise you.
Saturn Corporation was one of the most ambitious and innovative automobile projects ever undertaken by General Motors (GM). Unlike most car brands created by simply introducing new models, Saturn was established as an entirely new company with its own manufacturing plant, engineering team, dealer network, labor agreement, and business philosophy. General Motors hoped Saturn would revolutionize the American automobile industry and help the company compete with Japanese automakers, whose reliable and fuel-efficient vehicles were rapidly gaining popularity in the United States during the late 1970s and early 1980s. Although Saturn eventually became one of the most respected automobile brands in America, its story also became one of the industry's most famous examples of unrealized potential. From its groundbreaking beginning to its closure in 2010, Saturn represented both innovation and disappointment. The origins of Saturn can be traced back to the early 1980s when General Motors faced one of the greatest competitive challenges in its history. For decades, GM had dominated the American automobile market through brands such as Chevrolet, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, and Cadillac. However, the oil crises of the 1970s changed consumer preferences dramatically. American buyers increasingly wanted smaller, fuel-efficient, reliable, and affordable cars. Japanese manufacturers, including Toyota, Honda, and Nissan, were already producing compact cars that met these expectations. Their vehicles offered excellent fuel economy, dependable engineering, and high quality, making them increasingly attractive to American consumers. As imports gained market share, GM realized that its traditional approach was no longer enough. General Motors initially tried improving its existing compact cars, but executives concluded that competing directly with Japanese manufacturers required something much more radical. Instead of modifying one of its existing divisions, GM decided to create an entirely new company. This project was designed to be independent from the corporation's traditional bureaucracy and manufacturing systems. The new company would have its own engineering philosophy, labor agreements, manufacturing methods, pricing strategy, and customer service model. The goal was not simply to build another compact car but to create an American company capable of matching or exceeding Japanese quality standards while maintaining domestic production. The Saturn project officially began as an internal General Motors initiative in 1982 under the codename Saturn. During the next few years, GM engineers, designers, manufacturing specialists, and labor representatives worked together to develop a completely new approach to automobile production. On January 7, 1985, General Motors officially established the Saturn Corporation as a wholly owned subsidiary. Unlike other GM divisions, Saturn was organized with considerable independence and was encouraged to experiment with new ideas. The company adopted the slogan, "A different kind of car company." This slogan reflected Saturn's mission of changing not only how automobiles were built, but also how customers experience purchasing and owning a vehicle. One of Saturn's most revolutionary features was its relationship with employees. Instead of relying on the traditional labor management structure that characterized much of the American automobile industry, Saturn introduced a cooperative partnership between General Motors and the United Auto Workers (UAW). Managers and workers collaborated more closely than at most other automobile factories. Employees were encouraged to participate in quality improvement, production planning, and problem solving. This collaborative culture attracted attention from business leaders around the world because it represented a new approach to manufacturing in the United States. General Motors also selected an entirely new location for Saturn's manufacturing operations. Rather than using an existing GM factory, the company constructed a modern manufacturing complex in Spring Hill, Tennessee. At the time, Spring Hill was a small rural community, but it soon became the center of Saturn's operations. Construction of the plant began in 1986, and the facility incorporated many advanced manufacturing techniques, robotics, flexible assembly systems, and modern quality control procedures were integrated into production from the beginning. The plant was designed specifically for Saturn rather than adapted from older GM facilities, allowing engineers to implement innovative manufacturing practices. Another major innovation involved Saturn's dealer network. General Motors recognized that many consumers disliked traditional automobile purchasing because prices often depended on negotiation. Saturn therefore introduced a no-haggle pricing policy. Every customer paid the same advertised price, eliminating bargaining and making the purchasing process more transparent. Dealers were trained to focus on customer satisfaction rather than aggressive sales tactics. This approach was highly unusual in the American automobile industry and quickly became one of Saturn's defining characteristics. Saturn also sought to build strong relationships with customers after the sale. Dealerships emphasized friendly service, clear communication, and long-term customer loyalty. Many Saturn owners reported unusually positive experiences, and the company developed one of the highest customer satisfaction ratings in the industry. Over time, Saturn ownership became associated with a sense of community rather than simply transportation. Owners often described themselves as members of the Saturn family, and the company actively encouraged these relationships through events and customer programs. From an engineering perspective, Saturn introduced several innovative features. One of the most distinctive was the extensive use of dent-resistant polymer body panels. Unlike traditional steel panels, these polymer panels resisted small dents and minor parking lot damage while also reducing the likelihood of rust. The polymer panels became one of Saturn's most recognizable characteristics. Demonstrations showing shopping carts bouncing harmlessly off Saturn doors became common in advertising campaigns, helping distinguish Saturn from competitors. Although Saturn was officially founded in 1985, consumers had to wait several years before purchasing the first vehicle. Engineers spent considerable time refining the company's first product, known as the Saturn S series. General Motors wanted the first Saturn to demonstrate that American manufacturers could build compact cars matching Japanese competitors in quality, reliability, and fuel efficiency. Extensive testing was conducted before production began. The first Saturn vehicle rolled off the Spring Hill assembly line on July 31, 1990. This event marked the culmination of nearly a decade of planning, engineering, and investment. General Motors had invested billions of dollars in the Saturn project, making it one of the corporation's largest new ventures. Expectations were extremely high. Industry analysts viewed Saturn as GM's opportunity to reinvent itself and regain customers who had switched to imported automobiles. The initial Saturn lineup consisted of compact sedans, coupes, and station wagons, collectively known as the S series. Although modest in size, these vehicles offered impressive fuel economy, competitive reliability, attractive styling, and practical interiors. Customers appreciated their affordability, ease of maintenance, and durable polymer body panels. The cars quickly earned a reputation for solid engineering and dependable everyday transportation. Automotive journalists responded positively to Saturn's launch. Reviews frequently praised build quality, customer service, and the innovative buying experience. While the S-Series was not the fastest or most luxurious compact car on the market, it successfully achieved its primary goal of demonstrating that an American manufacturer could produce a competitive small automobile. Many reviewers believed Saturn represented a refreshing departure from traditional Detroit practices. Saturn's advertising strategy also differed from that of most competitors. Instead of emphasizing horsepower or luxury, advertisements focused on ordinary employees, satisfied customers, teamwork, honesty, and community. Commercials often featured real Saturn workers discussing their commitment to quality rather than actors delivering scripted marketing messages. This approach strengthened the brand's image as a trustworthy and customer-oriented company. The public response exceeded many expectations. Thousands of customers placed orders before production reached full capacity, and waiting lists developed at numerous dealerships. Buyers appreciated not only the cars themselves but also the pleasant purchasing experience. Many customers who disliked negotiating prices found Saturn dealerships refreshingly straightforward. High customer satisfaction translated into strong owner loyalty, an achievement rarely matched by other automobile manufacturers during that period. Saturn also became known for creating a unique corporate culture. Employees often expressed pride in working for the company, while customers felt personally connected to the brand. The relationship between dealers, factory workers, management, and owners became one of Saturn's greatest strengths. This culture distinguished Saturn from virtually every other automobile manufacturer operating in North America. The early 1990s were the most exciting period in Saturn Corporation's history. After years of planning and billions of dollars in investment by General Motors, Saturn had finally entered the American automobile market. The company had been created with an ambitious mission to challenge Japanese automakers by producing small, reliable, fuel-efficient cars while completely changing the traditional American car buying experience. The first Saturn vehicles had received positive reviews. Customers were responding enthusiastically, and the company's unusual approach to sales and customer service was attracting attention throughout the automobile industry. For a period, Saturn appeared to be exactly what General Motors had hoped it would become. The first Saturn S-Series automobiles were introduced for the 1991 model year. The lineup consisted primarily of the Saturn SL sedan, SC coupe, and SW wagon. These vehicles were compact, affordable, and designed primarily for everyday transportation. They were not luxury cars and were not intended to compete directly with high-performance vehicles. Instead, Saturn targeted buyers who wanted reliable transportation, good fuel economy, reasonable pricing, and a stress-free ownership experience. The S-Series was technologically significant because it was designed around Saturn's unique manufacturing philosophy. The cars used lightweight construction, efficient four-cylinder engines, and polymer exterior body panels. The dent-resistant panels were especially distinctive. A minor collision or shopping cart impact that might leave a dent in a conventional steel body panel often left little or no visible damage on a Saturn. This feature became an important part of the company's identity. The Saturn S-Series also benefited from careful engineering. The cars were designed to be relatively simple and economical to operate. Their compact dimensions made them suitable for city driving, while their fuel efficiency appealed to consumers concerned about gasoline costs. Saturn was therefore positioned perfectly for buyers who wanted an inexpensive alternative to larger American automobiles. However, the most revolutionary part of Saturn was arguably not the automobile itself. It was the customer experience. Saturn dealerships operated under a strict no-haggle pricing system. Customers were shown a fixed price rather than being encouraged to negotiate with salespeople. This eliminated one of the most frustrating aspects of traditional car buying. Instead of spending hours negotiating over the price of a vehicle, buyers could focus on selecting the model and equipment they wanted. Saturn's dealerships were also designed to be more welcoming. Sales staff were trained to avoid aggressive tactics, and customer service was emphasized throughout the purchasing process. This created a dramatically different experience from the stereotypical American car dealership. The strategy worked extremely well, particularly with customers who had previously disliked purchasing automobiles. Saturn's customer satisfaction became one of its greatest competitive advantages. Owners frequently praised dealership employees for being friendly and helpful. The company actively encouraged dealers to maintain relationships with customers after the sale. This approach produced a level of brand loyalty that was unusual in the automobile industry. Saturn owners also began forming communities around the brand. Customers attended events, communicated with other owners, and developed an emotional connection with the company. Saturn organized gatherings that celebrated its customers and employees, reinforcing the idea that the company was not simply selling automobiles but creating a community. One of the most famous examples was the Saturn Homecoming. In 1994, Saturn invited owners to visit the company's manufacturing facility in Spring Hill, Tennessee. Thousands of customers traveled from different parts of the United States and Canada to attend. The event demonstrated how unusually loyal Saturn customers had become. The homecoming events became an important part of Saturn's corporate culture. Owners were able to meet factory employees, tour facilities, and celebrate their shared enthusiasm for the brand. For many customers, this created a personal relationship with Saturn that went far beyond the normal relationship between an automobile manufacturer and its buyers. During the first half of the 1990s, Saturn continued expanding its sales network. More dealerships were opened across the United States, making the brand increasingly accessible. The company gradually became recognized as one of America's most successful new automobile brands. Saturn's sales reached an early peak in 1994, when the company sold approximately 286,000 vehicles. This was an impressive achievement for a brand that had only recently entered the market. The sales figures demonstrated that there was substantial demand for Saturn's approach. The success also attracted attention from competitors. Other automobile manufacturers began studying Saturn's customer service philosophy. The idea of no-haggle pricing, improved dealership treatment, and greater attention to customer satisfaction became increasingly influential in the industry. Saturn was especially successful among younger buyers and consumers who had previously purchased Japanese automobiles. The company offered something that many traditional American brands struggled to provide: an affordable American-built compact car with a reputation for quality and a modern customer experience. Another important factor was Saturn's manufacturing process. The relationship between management and the United Auto Workers was designed to be more cooperative than the traditional labor management system. Workers participated in decisions concerning production and quality improvement. This created a culture in which employees felt personally responsible for the quality of the vehicles they built. The Spring Hill factory became a symbol of this philosophy. Visitors could observe a modern manufacturing facility in which workers and management worked closely together. The factory was designed around advanced production techniques and flexible manufacturing systems. Saturn's leaders hoped that the methods developed there could eventually influence the broader General Motors organization. For a time, Saturn appeared to be a model for the future of General Motors. However, success created a new challenge. Saturn's original strategy was based on independence. The company had its own products, manufacturing methods, dealer network, corporate culture, and engineering approach. General Motors had intentionally allowed Saturn to operate differently from its traditional divisions, but maintaining this independence was extremely expensive. Saturn's first vehicles had been developed specifically for the company rather than being adapted from an existing GM platform. This meant that Saturn required significant investment in engineering, manufacturing, and tooling. While the cars generated strong customer satisfaction, the financial returns were more complicated. General Motors eventually began questioning whether Saturn's independent structure could be maintained indefinitely. The corporation wanted to use shared platforms and components across its brands to reduce development costs. From GM's perspective, developing unique Saturn vehicles was expensive. From Saturn's perspective, however, its independence was essential to its identity. This tension would become one of the most important themes in Saturn's later history. Another challenge was the limited size of Saturn's product lineup. The company initially focused heavily on compact cars. This worked well in the early 1990s, but consumers wanted a wider range of vehicles. Buyers increasingly expected automobile brands to offer mid-size sedans, larger family vehicles, sport utility vehicles, and eventually crossovers. Saturn did not immediately have products in all these categories. While the S-Series remained popular, customers who wanted a larger automobile often had to leave the Saturn brand. The company's management recognized the need for expansion. Saturn began considering larger and more diverse products. However, developing completely new vehicles required substantial investment. In the late 1990s, Saturn introduced the L-Series, a family of mid-size cars. These vehicles were intended to expand Saturn beyond the compact car market. The L-Series offered more interior space and stronger competition against mid-size vehicles from Toyota, Honda, and other manufacturers. Unfortunately, the L-Series did not achieve the same level of success as the original S-Series. The cars were based on a GM platform rather than Saturn's original unique architecture. Although this allowed General Motors to reduce development costs, it also meant that Saturn's products were becoming more closely connected to the rest of GM. This was the beginning of a fundamental change in Saturn's identity. The original Saturn philosophy had emphasized being different. Its cars were developed independently, its factories operated differently, and its dealers used a unique sales model. But as Saturn became more integrated into General Motors, some of these differences began to disappear. The company was still respected by customers, but the distinctive character that had made Saturn famous was becoming harder to maintain. Another problem was that Saturn's competitors were improving rapidly. Toyota, Honda, Nissan, and other manufacturers continued introducing increasingly sophisticated compact cars. Japanese manufacturers were no longer simply competing on reliability and fuel economy. They were also offering attractive styling, advanced technology, comfortable interiors, and extensive dealer networks.
Introduced near the end of the 1990s, the L-Series was a mid-size sedan and wagon designed to attract customers who had outgrown the smaller S-Series. It offered more interior space and a more traditional family car experience. However, the L series did not achieve the sales success that Saturn had hoped for. Its styling and quality were criticized in some reviews, and its shared GM engineering made it less distinctive than the original Saturn vehicles. The L series experience demonstrated one of Saturn's growing problems. General Motors wanted Saturn to use existing GM technology to reduce costs, but Saturn's original success had depended heavily on its independence. The company had been created specifically to develop its own products and manufacturing systems. As Saturn became more integrated into GM, its automobiles increasingly resembled products from other GM divisions. In 2002, Saturn discontinued the original S-Series after more than a decade of production. The S-Series had been the foundation of the company and was responsible for much of its reputation for reliability, affordability, and customer loyalty. Replacing it was the Saturn Ion, produced for the 2003 model year. The I-Don't was intended to continue Saturn's compact car tradition, but it was developed using GM's Delta platform rather than Saturn's unique architecture. This allowed General Motors to share engineering and manufacturing costs, but it also weakened Saturn's original identity. The I-Don't had several interesting features, including an unusual center-mounted instrument cluster and available coupe body styles. Saturn hoped that its distinctive design would attract younger customers. However, the vehicle faced significant competition from increasingly sophisticated compact cars from Toyota, Honda, Mazda, and other manufacturers. The I-Don't also suffered from quality and reliability criticisms. Problems involving components such as the ignition switch and other systems damaged its reputation. Although Saturn attempted to improve the vehicle through updates and later versions, the I-Don't never developed the same loyal following as the original S-Series. At the same time, Saturn recognized that it needed a sport utility vehicle. The answer was the Saturn Vue, introduced for the 2002 model year. The Vue became one of the most important products in Saturn's history because it entered the rapidly expanding SUV market. The Vue was a compact SUV designed to appeal to families and younger consumers. It offered a higher driving position, additional cargo capacity, and available all-wheel drive. These characteristics made it much more relevant to changing American consumer preferences than a traditional compact sedan. The Vue became relatively successful and helped increase Saturn's sales. It also demonstrated that Saturn could successfully compete outside the small car market. However, like the Ion, the Vue was based on GM architecture. Its relationship with other GM products highlighted the ongoing tension between Saturn's original independent philosophy and General Motors' desire for efficiency through shared technology. Saturn's product strategy continued evolving. The company eventually introduced the Relay, a minivan developed as part of GM's broader minivan program. The Relay was introduced for the 2005 model year and was closely related to minivans sold by Chevrolet and Buick. Although it provided Saturn with the practical family vehicle, it did little to strengthen the brand's unique identity. This was becoming an increasingly serious problem. Saturn had originally promised customers a different kind of car company. By the middle of the 2000s, however, many Saturn vehicles were increasingly similar mechanically to other GM products. Customers could still receive Saturn's customer service experience, but the cars themselves no longer felt as fundamentally different. General Motors also began reducing Saturn's independence in manufacturing. The original Spring Hill facility had been designed specifically around Saturn's manufacturing philosophy. Over time, production responsibilities changed, and Saturn vehicles were produced at multiple GM facilities. This further reduced the sense that Saturn was a completely separate company. Nevertheless, Saturn received some genuinely impressive new products during the second half of the 2000s. One of the most important was the Saturn Aura, introduced for the 2007 model year. The Aura was a mid-size sedan designed to compete directly with popular models such as the Toyota Camry and Honda Accord. Its styling was modern and European-inspired, and automotive journalists responded positively to its design and driving characteristics. The Aura represented an important attempt to restore Saturn's reputation. It was more sophisticated and attractive than some of the company's earlier products, and it demonstrated that GM could build a competitive midsize sedan. The Aura received several awards and positive reviews, but there was a major problem. Saturn's brand was no longer strong enough to guarantee high sales. The company had lost some of the distinctiveness that had made its early products successful. Another exciting product was the Saturn Sky, a two-seat roadster introduced for the 2007 model year. The Sky shared its basic platform with the Pontiac Solstice, but had its own distinctive exterior design. It was attractive, sporty, and relatively affordable. The Sky represented a return to the spirit of the original Saturn concept. It was different from ordinary GM sedans and SUVs, and its styling gave the brand a more exciting image. However, the roadster market was relatively small, and the Sky could not generate enough sales to transform Saturn's financial situation. Saturn also introduced the Outlook, a larger crossover SUV, for the 2007 model year. The Outlook was part of GM's strategy to enter the rapidly expanding crossover market. It offered 3 rows of seating and was intended to compete with vehicles such as the Honda Pilot and Toyota Highlander. The Outlook gave Saturn a more complete product lineup. By this point, the company offered compact cars, mid-size sedans, sports cars, and SUVs. On paper, Saturn had one of its strongest lineups in years. Unfortunately, the timing was terrible. The American automobile market was changing rapidly, and General Motors was facing enormous financial difficulties. Fuel prices increased significantly during the 2000s, making consumers more cautious about large vehicles. Then, in 2008, the global financial crisis caused automobile sales to collapse. General Motors was hit particularly hard. The company had enormous operating costs, large pension and healthcare obligations, substantial debt, and a declining share of the American automobile market. The crisis pushed GM toward the edge of bankruptcy. Saturn was caught in the middle of this corporate crisis. The company still had loyal customers and some attractive products, but General Motors no longer had the financial resources to maintain every brand. GM needed to concentrate on the brands it considered most strategically important. Saturn's future became increasingly uncertain. In 2008 and 2009, General Motors began examining possible solutions for Saturn. One potential option was to sell the brand rather than close it. A possible buyer emerged in the form of Penske Automotive Group, led by businessman Roger Penske. Penske proposed a plan under which Saturn could continue operating independently of General Motors. The idea generated considerable excitement among Saturn dealers and customers. Instead of disappearing, Saturn might survive under new ownership. The proposed arrangement was unusual. General Motors would continue supplying vehicles temporarily while Penske searched for another manufacturer to supply Saturn automobiles in the future. Penske hoped to use Saturn's dealer network and customer loyalty as the foundation for a new independent automobile company. For Saturn enthusiasts, the proposal represented a potential rescue. However, the plan faced a critical problem. A long-term vehicle supply agreement had to be established. Penske needed another manufacturer to provide vehicles after the temporary GM supply arrangement ended. Negotiations were held with several potential manufacturers, but an acceptable agreement could not be secured. Without a reliable source of vehicles, Penske could not operate Saturn as a viable automobile brand.